In the early 1920s, racist terrorist organizations such as the Ku Klux Klan were very prominent in Oregon. 25% of Oregon citizens were card-carrying members of the KKK. The governor at the time, Walter Pierce, ran and won with Klan support in 1923.
In this time period of such racism, blacks were still segregated. They still had to sit in different areas of the theater as white men sat in different ends of the bus and even sit in completely different restaurants. This complete prejudice lasted many years.
In the 30s, the real estate industry began to define the meaning of a white segregated neighborhood as one that did not have a black occupied residence within 4 blocks. Realtors held to their code of ethics and followed the condition on many deeds that homes in white neighborhoods were not to be sold to blacks. By the 1940s, there was a considerably big neighborhood that was not segregated called Vanport. But the mini cultural city was destroyed by a Columbia River flood. This forced blacks into the predominantly white Portland, but blacks still suffered segregation by being redlined into the Albina area.
Like most places in the U.S. during the 1950s, Oregon was having a civil rights movement. In 1953, the Urban League and its supporters convinced the legislature to pass Oregon's Civil Rights Bill. With its passage, the state of Oregon came closer to ensuring all persons within the jurisdiction of this state shall be entitled to the full and equal accommodations, advantages, facilities, and privileges of any place of public accommodation, resort, or amusement, without any distinction, discrimination, or restriction on account of race, religion, color, or national origin.
These facts are so important for not only black citizens, but for all, to understand the strides that we have made as a society. For us to know what we call home was once like, and to see the evolution and progress of Portland, Oregon. Thank you.
Thank you, girls. The information in that slideshow is just a small fraction of the black experience in Oregon, which greatly contributed to the freedoms and opportunities that we have today, even though we still have a long way to go. Now I will explain to you guys what the BSU is and how it is significant to Park Rose. BSU is an acronym for the phrase Black Student Union. Unfortunately, there is a large percentage of the African American student body at Park Rose who are uninformed of what we are. On behalf of BSU, I will let you all know that we are not a group which segregates ourselves from the rest of the school. The Park Rose BSU is a fun, safe environment where you can make new friends, partake in interesting activities and field trips, and learn new things you didn't know before. Even though the focus of the BSU is Black history and culture, anyone and everyone can join our informal club. Now, African American culture, as you know, is rooted in Africa. It is a blend of chiefly sub-Saharan African and Sahelian cultures. Although slavery greatly restricted the ability of Americans of African descent to practice their cultural traditions, many practices and values, their beliefs survived, and over the time have modified and blended with American culture and other cultures, such as that of the Native Americans. There are some facets of African American culture that were accentuated by the slavery period. The result? A unique, dynamic, colorful, and bold culture that has had and continues to have a profound impact on mainstream American culture, as well as the culture of the broader world. With that being said, please enjoy this authentic African American dance performed by your very own Fatima Hoff and Fabiola Dormazel.
Yay!
Depuis Philippe la rejoint pour danser et chercher.
presentation, the BSU hopes that you found this information interesting and even eye-opening. Park Roast is about diversity, so consider having lunch today with someone you don't know, who is obviously of a different race, heritage, or religion other than your own. But before we end, I would like to introduce to you a senior that you all know and love, to speak to you on behalf of the issues concerning where we stand now as a society and where we are going. Please welcome to the stage, Sierra Stallings.
Good morning, guys. So for these last few minutes, I'd like to just speak on what it means to be a part of the Black Student Union here at Park Rose. But before I begin, you may have a particular thought in mind. Why is there a white student speaking on behalf of the Black Student Union? Yes, my skin is white. However, this is only due to skin pigmentation evolution. My skin is just a product of evolution, and there is no resemblance of my heritage in the color of my skin. But for those of you who know me, you know that I am mixed. And the issue arises here. As a mixed student, I cannot identify myself in a particular group because we do not live in a racially colorblind society. But this makes sense, because race is still a very sensitive issue. It was an issue that was an element in a gruesome civil war taking place here on America's soil less than 2 centuries ago. And this time period is minuscule in comparison to evolutionary terms. As a society, our identity and our race in terms of color are still inherently linked. This might not seem problematic to you now, but our races are also inherently linked to the color of our, they're also inherently linked to social stereotypes. And that's a problem. Because this type of method of thinking creates a blur in the perception of others. We can no longer look at another person without identifying them by their race and what the color of their skin represents in stereotypes. And BSU stresses you to recognize this because this type of thinking reverberates in the attempts of building a collective and an all-inclusive community, a community which BSU promotes. And an all-embracing environment is still absent here at Park Rose. In a school that is so rich in cultural diversity, we have yet to appreciate and understand how it is profoundly impacting our lives. We are still culturally unimmersed, which is evident in the discriminatory and the blindly racist dialogue that exists in and outside of the classroom. Students face this type of dialogue every day, and there have been cases where students feel obligated to switch out of a class, including AP classes and honors courses, because they feel so uncomfortable in a classroom environment. The classroom should not put students at a disadvantage. The purpose of education is to give us an advantage in society. And BSU encourages you to understand that education is a fundamental step in developing an all-embracing community. Moreover, it's important to note that the points I am making are not directed at a specific audience. We all have the tendency to speak unmindfully, because we all have an innate cognitive process that we all have an innate cognitive process that is consumed by a presumptuous method of thinking. And how do I know that? I know this because 2 million years ago, our brains developed the prefrontal cortex. And this part of the brain acts as an experience simulator. And as it functions, it enacts what is called an impact bias, meaning every moment in our lives, our experiences are impacted by the conscious and subconscious mind, determining how you are going to perceive things and possibly deciding whether or not you are listening to me right now. Your impact bias is furnished by your environment, like your home life. Therefore, your impact bias then influences your standards and your values. Well, why is that information important? It's important because due to the prefrontal cortex, we all have the capability to gain insight on things outside of our own reality. So when someone asks you to walk in their shoes, do it. Expose yourself to new culture without prejudice, and allow yourself to recognize the bias that's engineered in the functionality of your brain so you can overcome racial stereotypes that define yourself and the person sitting next to you. And BSU stresses this recognition because Our generation is going to make a profound impact on the future of the U.S. government system. The millennial generation, which is all of us here, anyone born after 1980 to 1999, will be recorded as the most diverse generation in U.S. history. So we encourage you to practice gaining cultural insight, practice speaking before you think, and walk out of the auditorium today with an all-inclusive worldview. We are Africa. We are the USA. We are the world. We are the Park Rose